So we're going to do something different and on the brink this week. We're not going to talk about war. We are not going to talk about mass murder. And we definitely are not going to talk about any idiot politicians. You can go someplace else for that. Instead, I want to devote this episode to a sad situation much closer to home, much more mundane, and in many ways more searing. And that is when our parents need us to take care of them. Like me, the two guests that we brought in today um, have been the main caretakers or are the main caretakers now for their parents. To us, and we are all daughters, which is not a coincidence, has fallen a task that's both difficult and heartbreaking and super important. Let me introduce them to you. First is Jenny Dewar. Jenny is a former Broadway stage manager, but 17 years ago, she left the bright lights behind and came to Vermont, and she's still there running her own business involving hospitality and event management. She's still taking care of critters. This time it's what, 6 cats, 3 goats, and a red hen or two. Our second guest is Paula Denault. Paula has always lived in Albany. She and her husband Dan have two amazing sons, Ryan and Peyton. And most important to her are travel and friends, but most of all, family. And in full disclosure, Paul and I are part of the same gigantic Italian family. I think we're like third cousins, something like that. And I also had one of her sons as a student once. I gave him an A, but he deserved it. It wasn't family ties.
Yeah.
It is family ties that bring her here today. I continue to exploit friends and relatives as a way to get panelists I don't have to pay. I understand that's the way we do it in radio these days. So let us get started right away. Jenny, can you tell us a little bit about when you first realized that you had to take over your parents' life? I think it was your mother first.
Yeah. So, my mom developed early onset Alzheimer's. She started showing symptoms when she was 48 and I was in my 20s, my early mid 20s. And she was diagnosed at 53 right after my wedding. And I didn't actually take over her care until I finally convinced my father that that would be the thing to do, because he had moved her up to Vermont, following us, which was not the plan in my world, but I always felt that her care was subpar. And so he finally let go of it. I immediately let go of the caregiver that she had, who was 75 using a walker. Long story, no need to go into that, but and had a crew of 4, and I led the crew and I managed it and I scheduled everybody and I took one of the shifts because we had a live-in person. And then I took every other weekend while she went away, and I also just checked in daily. So that was about the last 5 years of her life. And then for my dad, he was fell with cancer 2 years later, and the moment that he was sick, I was at his side the entire time.
So for me, mother was in her late 80s and was still putting out the family newsletter. She was the historian. And her grandson called me when the new edition of the newsletter came out and said, "What's wrong with which is what we called her grandma." And there was a typo in the newsletter. My mother never made mistakes, never. And that was the first hint. And it was more than a few years after that when I finally quit working. I retired early. I came back from Europe where I was and moved into the family home, my mother's house. And I've been here now for about 5 years doing this. And my brilliant mother can't use a computer anymore. The next step in her decline was I found her down in the basement where her office was set up, screaming obscenities at the computer. She thought it was taken over by a demon. She doesn't cook anymore. She doesn't clean. She is a different person. We still see glimmers of the old Teresa, but not all the time. How about you, Paula? You take care of your father, a little bit different than us.
Right. I started with my mother in 2015 or 14. She passed in 2016. We moved my dad into an independent living facility in Colony, which he lived there fine until he didn't. when he was 92, I retired. And just like your mom, he worked in a bank and finances were his thing. So he bounced a check and I'm
Wow.
like, this isn't good. Oh, something's going on. So that's when it started. He's 95 now. So I've been at this for like 3 years. I would go every day. I check in every day. About a year ago, he fell. Well, he kept falling. This one particular time a year ago, I found him on the floor and he had been there for quite at least 24 hours. Even though he told me he wasn't, and he broke his shoulder and we had to put him into assisted living. But I still go every day.
And how long do you spend when you go in to see your dad?
I can be there from an hour to 2 or 3 hours every day.
Yeah, that takes a chunk out of your life. Jenny, you had you were living with your parents. You were in the same home. I think the same situation I had.
No, so when I moved to Vermont, we bought our own house. We kind of came up here because they had built a house up here, but it wasn't really deliberate to find a place so close to them. It just happened that way, but it's 2 miles away from where they lived. I now live in the family home, but I only moved here a year ago. So when I was caring for mom, I lived 2 miles away, but I was here every day, and then I would, as I said, I would come and stay here over the weekends when Tess went away. But it's interesting you guys talking about the way you figured it out. I mean, I knew something was wrong with mom for years, and everyone said I was dramatic and whatever. But right before my wedding, she at the wedding shower, she gave me this fancy lingerie, which was lovely, but it was a size small. And I'm 5'10" and haven't worn a size small since I was probably about 8. So I went to Lord and Taylor to return it or to exchange it for a larger size, and they needed the receipt. And I was like, there's no receipt. And they're like, oh, we must have it, blah, blah. And I said, there's no receipt. My mother has Alzheimer's, and that's why she. And as soon as the words came out of my mouth, I thought, oh, that's what it is. Mom has Alzheimer's.
Wow, wow, it's really hard.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the worst part of this. We're going to start. I'm a journalist, so I'm going to start with the bad news things. There are good things about helping parents, but it's really hard. And for me, I think it's the hygiene issues. My mother was immaculate. You could literally have, and we did eat off of her floor. And now it's as if she has no sense of smell. She does not. She does not willingly take a bath. Bathroom issues are huge and part of my day. And I find no guidance anywhere. Maybe this is true of you too. I'm pretty good at researching. I cannot find any information that really speaks to this. And I hope I'm not impinging on the dignity of our parents by bringing it up. But it's just like taking care of a toddler, a child.
Mhm.
Hygiene is a big part of elder care. How do you or did you cope with this, Paula?
So I'm a little different than you guys because I'm dealing with my father, right? So you would think that would be embarrassing for him and for me. And it is, but he got prostate cancer in 2015, so he has no control over his urine. So he had to start wearing Depends in 2015. He also has a colostomy. He's had that since 1985.
Wow.
So thank goodness when I was 18 years old, I taught my father how to care for the colostomy. Believe it or not, he wanted nothing to do with it. He was in denial. I got the manual out, so I knew what to do. So I took care of everything with him, with always wet. When I would show up every day when he was living independent, he wouldn't change his Depends. He thought he did, but he didn't. He can't smell, so he doesn't have that sense, which
Yeah.
is terrible.
Yeah, same with my mother. She just, in fact, for years, she still does it a little. If I say, Mom, let me get you clean underwear, and I never call it diaper or Depends, but it is. If I say, let me
Right.
get you clean underwear, she goes, I resent that you think I have no hygiene. And I mean, it's the balancing of hygiene and dignity. I still have trouble with that. Very difficult. Jenny, do you think I'm wrong to equate taking care of our parents with taking care of little children? I don't mean it that they're childlike, although in some ways that's not inaccurate, but it's not difficult. It's just all time consuming. You have to
It-
constantly be on the alert. It's
Yeah,
like having little kids under your care again.
it is, except that I feel like with little kids, you know they're going to grow out of it. And with my mom, I mean, your parents are both still living, so I'm talking from a different perspective, but it it it's like my brother tried to equate it with that, and he said, I change my kids' diapers, and I'm like, right, but mom is 180 pounds, and we have to use a mechanical lift to get her out of bed. And I changed the diapers in bed, I changed the diapers in the lift, I changed the diapers in the wheelchair that goes in the bathroom, I changed the diapers in her, beautiful wheelchair that I got her when I took over the care. So yes, I mean there's something a little bit similar, but it's much harder. You don't get mad, you don't get upset, you don't get frustrated with a baby for pooping in a
Right.
diaper. But like, there was a day that I changed mom, I had her all dressed. When I took over her care, I insisted she was bathed every day, dressed, she didn't stay in nightgowns. And I got her all ready for bed, and she was in a fresh depends, and then she pooped
And,
everywhere.
mm,
And it's so hard not to be like, what? Stop! Why would you do that? But you don't do that with a baby. So that's what's different to me.
yeah, that's a good thing. It's something if someone is sitting next to you and coughing, they're not doing it on purpose. They're not doing it to annoy you, and yet it's so damn annoying.
Right.
Want them to stop. And I sometimes have that with my mother. She has no short-term memory at all. So conversation has now devolved to the same 3 or 4 questions over and over again. And it's inevitably, did you ever love Frank? That's my ex-husband. I don't want to talk about him ever to anybody. She'll say it over and over and over again. And I I want to slap her, but I feel terrible when I do, but it's true. And she'll always give me a hint. She'll just look and say, are you in a bad mood? And that means I'm snapping at her. I have to stop. Paula, do you have ever your father's funny? He's so is mom, though, for that matter.
Right. It's funny. My father will say stuff and he catches himself. I think it's because of the expression that is probably on my face. Like
Yeah,
I must look at him in a way where he'll go, "Oh, wait a minute. That's not right."
yeah.
So,
He may not be as far along as my mother too. She
in some things he is, but in some things he's not.
yeah.
And our Mayo on the Brink is brought to you by the Apple Barn and Country Bake Shop in Bennington, Vermont. Famous for its legendary apple cider donuts, pies, gifts, and for their corn mazing covered bridge. Go to theapplebarn.com to learn more about the spirit of Vermont you can find at the Apple Barn.
My mother will be 98 on Thanksgiving Day, which is her birthday. So
Wow.
she's a little bit further along on this awful journey, and I'm making it sound horrible. And some days it is. If I have to change the bed two or three times in one day, I think it's pretty horrible. But there's a lot of good things that come from taking care of parents, and I want us to talk about that a little bit. Um, my mother tells me every day that she's happy I'm here. Are you happy living here? Because I don't know what I'd do if you weren't. And that means a lot. Even if she's just saying it from rote, it just means it helps. She also has a great sense of humor. She makes me laugh at least once a day, intentionally or not. I have made her a star of my Facebook page, writing down some of the funny things she says. And I know that when she's gone, I'm going to be happy that I came home, that I left Europe and came home and lived with my mother when she needed me. Do you feel the same, Jenny? It's in the past.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't trade a single moment of caring for her. So by the time I took over my mom's care, she was already nonverbal, and we were already feeding her. So there were 5 years of her we had to feed her. We had to, she couldn't say anything. She just made noises. And then sometimes she'd be like, oh, and you'd come in and I knew that she knew I was someone she loved. Music was always a thing. So I would sit on bed with her, and I actually have a beautiful video of Mary Widow. I played for her all the time. It was her favorite. And she was humming along to it. And I was like, are you singing, Mom? And she said, well, yes. And I was like, so there were moments like that by the time I took over her care. So my mom also died when she was 70 after suffering from Alzheimer's for over 20 years. So it's a different story from you guys. So
Jenny, how about what differences did you see taking care of your mother who had a mental disorder and your dad who had cancer?
Oh God. So my dad would text me every time he needed me, and I still have all the texts, and it went from saying what he needed to I need you to help to H.
Wow.
And that would just ding in the middle of the night. So I was walking into walls in the middle of the night whenever he needed his butt wiped. Right. So his brain worked until the last minute. He asked me to help him die. I mean, that's a whole other thing. Whereas my mom, I had to make that decision for her. My dad could say, I don't want to eat. My mom, we fed her. My dad, I guess, no, he had some stuff to take because I was giving him pain medication. So, he'd open his mouth, ready for the pain medication and that kind of thing. And whereas mom, I'm the one who came up with, because she would have bruises from my dad holding her mouth open to stuff all the pills in her mouth. And so we had a big mortar pestle, and I would grind up all the medication and put it in yogurt. And so that's how we fed her medicine and her vitamins in the morning with yogurt. So, I mean, it's night and day taking care of the two of them. Like, there's nothing comparable, I have to say.
Do you guys think that is it just a coincidence that we're all the daughters? Is this something sons can do? Paula, you have 2 sons. I have 3. You have a brother, Jenny. I'm not, first of all, I'm not sure I want my sons doing what I do for my mother. Her response is, if I had to have all of one kind, I'm glad it was girls. My mother has 5 daughters. So let's talk about that. Paula, would you want your sons to do for you what you do for your father? And if you do have a sister, she works.
Right.
And you don't have a brother, so it's hypothetical.
Right. When my mom and dad got married, they couldn't have children for 11 years. And my father begged my mother to have a surgery so that they could have children. And my mother did it. But my father never thought that a girl would be what they had. He assumed they were just going to have boys. So when I was born, he told the story all the time. He was not happy. But now, every day, every single day, my father will say to me, Paula, thank God I had you. And I wanted a son. My son would come here. He'd say, hi, Dad. Bye, Dad. See you another time, Dad. My father knows, and he thanks my sister and myself all the time. Now, I always say I'm screwed when I get older, but I hope it's not true. I mean, wouldn't want them to take care of me, but if someone was going to take care of me, I probably would want it to be them over someone I didn't know. I don't know. If I don't know, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
If I have dementia, I won't know, but.
Jenny, what do you think?
So I don't have kids.
Yes.
So, and my brother was, he would have said that he helped take care of my mom, but it was actually, he moved into the house because it was a financial situation. So he moved back home for a while. That's not caregiving the way that I was caregiving. And I don't want to speak ill of him because he recently passed away, and I love my brother. So, but there was a point where he came up while my dad was dying, and I said, my dad hadn't pooped in a couple of days. And I said to him, if you don't poop while I'm out and Keith is in charge, for the one time, the one day of this, I'm going to kill you. And he said, oh, I'll do my best. And so I came back and he said, oh, Jenny, come in the room. And I said, yes. And he said, I pooped. And I was like, okay, thank you. But when my brother and his family would come up for holidays with my mom, were they sitting next to her helping feed her the Thanksgiving dinner? No, it was me. There was just an expectation, and I wasn't on the clock then, right? So, but I was still expected to do it all. And did they come in and help me put her to bed and change the diapers? No, well, oh yeah, but I know what it's like to change a diaper because I have children. And I'm like, that's not the same thing. So no, I mean, I can't speak to all men and women and say that all men wouldn't be able to do this. But certainly in my family, there was this expectation, but it was me. So,
Yeah. I
yeah.
have to say, I always thought that I would be the one to take care of my mother. I didn't resent the job, but it is interesting that she so resents the idea of going into a home. That was that. For me, I would go. I'd be the president of the residence council. I would love it. But to her, Paula, you may know about this too. Her view is, no, if you go into an old age home, that means no one loves you.
Aw.
So I would never let that happen to my mother. I don't know.
My mother, that was the promise, that we would not put her in a facility. So the promise was to keep her at home. For me, I don't know how about you guys. I mean, Paula, you said you wouldn't know, and so-and-so can take care of you. Everyone I know, including my husband and all my dear friends, know that I absolutely categorically will not live with dementia or Alzheimer's. And since you can't make that decision on your own, even in a right to die state like Vermont, they know that they have to find a way to let me out, because I will not live with it.
Well, that is a question that I want to ask is, you obviously did have a discussion with your parents, Jenny, about the end of life. My mother, oh my God, my mother has made really clear she doesn't want any extensive measures taken. Right. Yeah. The time comes, that's it. We used to accuse her of writing that down on napkins to make sure when we were in restaurants that we would know that if anything ever happened, nothing. She wants nothing done to take care of her. She's very practical about that. So I do think sometimes, I don't know how you avoided that. When I get up in the morning and she's not up yet, I go in and check on her to see if she's still with us. It makes me sad that I do it. I feel like really morbid, but I do. Paula, how about you? Do you check on your dad all the time, worried that he's still there or not?
So the assisted living facility has my landline, and they have my cell line phone number, but they seem to always call my landline. That's why I can't get rid of my home phone. When that phone rings, it doesn't matter. Yeah. My mind always goes to, this is the call. Which sounds horrible, but I go every day, and I do have the aides phone numbers, and I text them all the time. Yeah.
It won't happen suddenly for you guys. It won't. I mean, the main way that someone dies of Alzheimer's is pneumonia. And that's what happened to my mom. And I came back from a business trip, and I took one look at her and I said, what's wrong? And they were like, oh, she's under the weather. And I was like, she has pneumonia. And I knew it. So she lasted another couple of weeks. But and I said to my dad, no, nothing, no breathing tube, no feeding tube, nothing. And he agreed. And she had not done her advanced directives. So we made that decision for her. And the only way we could do that was because she was at home. Because if you take someone to a hospital, their job is to revive someone. And unless there's something in writing, they have to. So as soon as she was sick, I was like, she's not going in. I had the doctor come to her. And so we just let her go peacefully. And my dad was more proactive, because we had a conversation of what his last qualities of life were, and when they were gone, he didn't want to be here. And so I had to actually assist my dad's death. And
So Jenny, he explained that he had some like a checkoff list of what was quality of life.
yeah,
And when that was gone, then he was
Yeah.
done.
that's right. And I can't honestly say what the three things were. I know one of them was his phone, watching movies and being in contact with people. And when he handed me his phone, I knew that was the beginning of the end.
Wow.
And then he wanted to take the pill because we are in a right to die state, but Vermont doesn't work that way. You have to pronounce that you want to go. You have to do it to another doctor 2 weeks later. He didn't have 2 weeks. So I had to literally feed him morphine every 3 hours with the hospice prescribed this. Otherwise I would have been a murderer, right? So it was prescribed, and I fed him morphine every 3 hours so that he would not eat or didn't want to eat or drink and be uncomfortable with that. But it took 3 days. That was awful. Mom, we
Beautiful daughter. Talk about a beautiful daughter, Jenny. That's
I slept in bed with him and everything, but no penis sightings. That was the big thing with him. But with Mom, we just, once she had pneumonia, it was just a waiting game. And so it was a caregiver who came and said her breathing is different.
it's really hard. Every day I sort of wish that I want her to go like my father, fall asleep at night and then not wake up. And then I'm so relieved when she's okay and she gets up and has coffee. So it's a roller coaster.
You'll know I don't think it's going to happen out of nowhere for either one of you, because that's not how Alzheimer's works.
My father had pneumonia 2 weeks ago.
And he got over it?
If I told you the story, you won't believe it. Got up, he looked at me, I was hysterical. He said, Paula, what's the matter? I said, I don't know. He said, am I going to make it? And I said, I don't think so. And then he came back.
Italians.
And our Mayo on the Brink is brought to you by Peacock Pots. The crew at Peacock Pots is busy right now throwing pottery as we speak to be ready in time for your holiday shopping. Make sure to check out their brand new website coming soon at peacockpots.com. And our Mayo on the Brink is also brought to you by Orchard Air LLC, a multifaceted company that encompasses a state-of-the-art recording studio, event management services, and Karen's Place, a gorgeous guest house available as a short-term rental for up to 12. Donations from Orchard Air LLC profits every year go directly to the Alzheimer's Association.
Listen, I have time for one more question. I saved a big one. And it's this. What have you learned while taking care of your parents about yourself? For me, I have no patience. I think this is a test by whatever, the universe, to learn patience. When my mother asked me the same questions over and over again, when the same problems arise day after day, when she loses her wallet or she can't find something or stumbles, and I have to just be patient and go, that's my life lesson, is I have to slow down and be more patient, understanding. How about you guys? Jenny?
Oh, that's such a big question. I'm going to give one piece of advice though. Before I say that, my mom was obsessed with her red purse. So if anything happened, where's my purse? And then everyone had to look for her purse.
Yep.
So then we bought her like 45 red purses. So there was always a red purse to find, because there was nothing in the purse. So anyway, that's just a piece of advice for everyone. If they're obsessed with something, make sure you have a lot of them. What did I learn about myself? That I can really do anything. That I will not live with Alzheimer's. My patience. Yeah, I'm not patient, but I did. That's a real, Paula, you have to go. I have to think about that one.
I know, I'm over here thinking 100 thoughts are coming through my head. The one thing we didn't touch on, and I think it's kind of important. I asked my father if he's afraid to die. And I think I always was afraid to die. And he'll say, I know what I have here. I don't want to go there. And I always say, but Mom is there. So I think for me, I might not be afraid to die now. Not now.
That's great.
Right?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
That helps me. Okay, so my parents didn't really believe in much, I will say. They were pure intellectuals. I'm a goddess worshiper, but I have the intellectual and the spiritual. Spiritual is 100% in. The intellectual is like, oh, I don't belong. Is there really something? What I have learned is there is, and that's all I can tell you. I don't know what it is, but my mom has been by my side for the past 10 years.
Oh,
Yep.
She's the one who
Sounds nice.
told me through messages that my brother had passed away. And that's why I wear this dragonfly here. So what
Wow.
I learned is what I believe is actually true. Your spirit does go somewhere, and it doesn't matter what you believe.
Oh, that's great.
Right? So that's something
Yeah.
important to have learned.
My mother has
I'm not
asked
afraid
me,
of dying. Not at all.
my mother's asked me repeatedly if I believe in an afterlife, if I think she'll ever see her mother. So I know she thinks about it, but I don't know if she can express fear anymore. That worries me a bit. I don't want her to be afraid. You know, the best, here's something we didn't talk about that I want to throw in here, and that is the best piece of advice for dealing with this graciously. Because you have to do, if you do this, you can't just take over and be resentful and hateful. You have to do it graciously. Get out, get help if you can. And it was to treat care like an improvisation where you never say no. Whatever the person comes up with, you just go with it and say, okay, yeah. So you saw Aunt Ro, who's been dead for 2 years now. You saw Aunt Ro. What did she have to say? Why are you thinking about her today? And it opens up a conversation that you might not have had otherwise. It's been amazing. I love that piece of advice. So,
I think you have to keep humor.
okay.
One of the things
Yep.
early on when mom still was verbal, she said, picked up a magazine and said, I don't know if I've read this magazine. I was like, oh my God, imagine the money we're going to save in magazines. And we just had a great laugh over that. And my dad was, he'd make a sound and I'd be like, uh-oh, is it flatulence or poop? And he'd be like, flatulence. And so, we had great laughs over all of it. And the no penis sighting was huge. Like we
Yeah.
both got a good kick out of that. I had to clean his butt, but he was not going to see his penis. And so, yeah.
Okay, that bridges the whole gender thing too. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool. That is pretty funny.
Yeah.
So I want to propose a toast to our parents. I know you all have glasses too, and I want to propose a toast to say to our great parents. Can't get born without them, and now it's our job to help them at the end of life too. So
And
Absolutely.
I both well, and it's okay. You are doing a great job.
right.
And you're never, ever, ever going to forget that you did this for them. And when they visit you after they're gone, the one thing I promise you is they are going to visit you when they were as they were healthy. And all of this yucky part of it is not what will be forefront in your brain. That is a promise.
Oh, that's great.
Perfect.
Thank you, Paula
Thank
and
you.
Jenny. I'll toast to that. So before we leave this week, there's one other voice I want you to hear from, and it is that of our executive producer, Zach Grady. He's the one who's been fixing and working on the audio and keeping us all to a schedule. He makes this move along. He's great. He also is a young man, only child with a mother. And so I want him to respond to the question that we talked about today. Do you think sons could do this, Zach? Could you take care of your mother when she's old and frail?
Yeah, absolutely. I could do it. Would she let me? That's my question. I mean, and that's just it is something that I'm not preparing to deal with. It's something that I'm dealing with now. I mean, whether it comes to technology or software updates or anything
No,
that
Zach, we're talking about changing diapers, changing beds, getting someone to eat nutritiously and not eat ice cream all day. We're talking about the hard things. You think you could handle that?
honestly, I think it would be easier to change my mother's diaper than teach her how to use a software update on an iPhone.
And it's all hypothetical, of course, because she has 4 sisters. We're going to take care of each other.
Well, and you guys have made that clear for years to us. I think maybe some of the reasons why the sons or the grandsons in this particular family, and I'm not talking for all families, I am just kind of speaking from the experience I know. I mean, you guys have been this strong, independent force for our entire life. And you guys have always banded together and stuck together, even as you fight and argue. We know how close all of you guys are, and that you are there for one another. I mean, just from previous experiences with medical things that have happened in
Crises,
this
yep.
family. Yeah, absolutely. We've seen it happen. The thing though is you guys have always been the control. You guys have always been the conductor of the train. I question, even as skills or competency may diminish, do you really want to get out of the driver's seat? And I don't know if a mother in general, and I can't speak for a mother, but I just, based on what I know, I don't know if you guys would be able to give up control to let us as sons, as men, be the matriarch of a family.
I'm not ready to give up control even today. I'm still in the driver's seat. And with that, thank you, Zach, and good night.
Music for this episode of An Armeo on the Brink has been composed by David Keckley. His works are available through Pine Valley Press, a Williamstown, Massachusetts music publishing firm.
Thank you.